Hey folks, so there was a great question on CampusWire about once the database container is created and the SQL files from the database files folder are run, the question essentially was how then do we add additional databases to the folder, like your project database, and get them to run. And so it's not quite as simple as just putting the files in the folder. It takes a couple extra steps, but let's walk through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to DataGrip, and let's say for the purposes of this example, we're going to make something that looks like Huskygram from one of the previous homeworks or something like that. But what I want to do first is in DataGrip, I want to add the database folder or the database files folder from my project repo. So over here in the files area, and remember if you don't see this panel, you can click right here and it should show up. Over here in the files panel, I'm going to choose attach new directory to project. Now, this is DataGrip project. This project right here doesn't have anything to do with your project repo and whatnot. Okay, well, let me drag this down so you can see it. Okay, so I just need to navigate over to, let's see, where did I put it? I think it's course materials, summer, and then walk through, and then I'm going to add the database files folder. And once you notice, the stuff that you see here is the same as what you would see in VS Code in terms of the database files. Hold on, let me close some of these things. So now that we have the folder in DataGrip, what we can do is create a new SQL file. So I'm sorry if that's kind of out of the video, but I'm just going to choose SQL file here. And let's see, I'm going to name it maybe huskygram.sql. Okay. And I'm just going to copy and paste some code I have already into the file. This is where you would put your, this is the file where you would develop your project schema. And also you could have a separate file maybe that is huskygram data, or maybe have huskygram schema, huskygram data, something like that. But for this example, everything's just going in the one file. So I have my create the database, use, create the tables, etc. All right, so I'm going to save this, and now we see it here. So when we go back to VS Code, we should see Huskygram is there. Now you'll notice it's green and it says U. This means in terms of Git, this file is untracked, meaning that Git/GitHub, but on your machine, Git doesn't know really about, it knows about the file, but it's not like keeping track of updates and changes and whatnot to it because it's untracked. All right, so now that that file is there, of course you can open it, it's the same stuff I just pasted. We have to figure out how do we get the DB container to essentially run this file. Okay, so there's a couple of ways. One would be that you could run it through DataGrip, but that's not reproducible, meaning that if the TAs or I want to run it sort of in the future, we can't rely upon having to go to DataGrip and do it. So once the file for your project database is inside the database files folder, what we're going to do is I'm going to come down to the terminal here, and I'm going to type docker compose down db. So this is going to do a couple things. It's going to stop the database container, and it's going to delete it. It's going to not exist anymore. Why is that important? Well, it's important because these files in the database files folder get run by MySQL when the container is created. So essentially I need to recreate the container. So I'm going to hit docker compose down, going to stop. Now, don't worry about the network. It's still in use because the other two containers are still there. And so now I'm going to rebuild. I'm going to sort of restart the container. Not restart it. I'm going to create a new container, I should say. So I'm going to say docker compose up db, and then -d for the detached mode. So I'm going to hit enter. And then let's go look at the Docker logs. So I'm going to come back. Oops, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to come here. I'm going to go to MySQL DB. And let's see. Classic. Okay, so you see right here, it executed huskygram. Seems to be that everything's okay. Yeah. Okay, so we have created the databases, or spun up the database container again, and so we come back to datagrip to make sure that our database was created, and we'll reload the database, sort of refresh the database system in datagrip. We'll check, but okay, ignore that. That is there from a previous version of me testing this out. So huskygram is not able to be selected, so meaning it was not created for some reason. So that means that we need to go look at the Docker logs to see what happened. So if we go to the Docker logs, you'll see that it appears that it started running it, and you would expect that these would sort of be in time-based order, but they're not always necessarily, depending on how things operate. But if you come up here a little bit, you'll see that there's an error here, and it says can't drop database huskygram. So if we look at our SQL, you'll notice it's just dropped database huskygram, but if database huskygram doesn't exist, then we have to say drop database if exists, in the case that, well, the database doesn't exist. So we're going to save that. Just going back to the logs for a second. So sometimes this can be a lot to kind of parse through, particularly if you're not necessarily familiar with looking at logs. Notice that this says error. Don't worry about any of this stuff right here. But if you think there's some problem in how the files are getting loaded, the SQL files are getting loaded, you can always come to the Docker logs and choose search terminal and type error, and it will sort of find the various places where there might be errors. So it's just a kind of quicker way to locate them. All right, so we're going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and let me clear this up, and I'm going to kind of redo the process of shutting down and deleting the container, the DB container, and restarting it. So I'm going to do docker compose, I can't spell, down db, and then we'll do docker compose up db -d. Notice that the if exists is there now. So let's go to the database logs, and so notice huskygram, notice it did get to the todo.sql, which sort of alphabetically comes later. If we search for error, we don't see any errors, so that might be a good thing. That's probably a good thing that there's no errors. So if we go back to datagrip, refresh the database, we will click here, and we'll notice that now there's huskygram, and so we can add it to our system, and there it is. There's our tables. I didn't put any data in for now, but this was just to show you how to load the tables. So just to recap, once you have your database model situated and you've tested it and you're confident in it, go ahead and go to datagrip, load the database files folder of your project repository, create a new SQL file, and put your DDL, and below it you can put all of your insert statements for your mock data, or you can separate those into two files. Just make sure the file names alphabetically, the DDL comes before the create data file. So put it there. then you should see it in VS Code. Now, just to be clear, you could just create a new file here and add the SQL, but I'm just trying to stick with SQL and DataGrip and Python in VS Code. But in any event, once you have the file or files created, do the docker compose down db to stop the database container and delete it, and then do docker compose up db-d to recreate the database container, check it in DataGrip, and if it's there, you're good to go. All right, have a good one.